We're having a really busy winter as usual, which is nice. Well, we're doing a lot of work anyway, going all over the country. We've been to Scotland, Ireland, France, Wales, and obviously an awful lot of work in England at the moment. And just doing our best to go and help clients as best we can. It all comes down to a number of things really. One, they know what they want to do. Like if you're going to get us into do some bits and pieces. Some people just want us to net and crop silvers and move them around fisheries, which is, just get this for the dog, which is something we do a lot of, as do a lot of people. But quite often we're tasked with moving fish and giving advice based on what we're finding. Obviously, some people tend to ring us and have very high expectations of what we're going to catch. Classic examples when you go to a lake and you net what you can net, or I mean obviously we electrofish as well, but if you're there to do a silverfish removal, then you'll net as much water as you can. We've got an awful lot of kit, we can take out an awful lot of water, but there's always people stood there who go, oh, they haven't caught black eye, or they haven't caught scaly, or they haven't caught this. It's like, well, we're not here to do that. You know, it's very important as a club or a fishery that to stipulate exactly what you want us to do before we get there. You're never going to catch all the fish, no one is. You know, little tiny stock ponds or little tiny 1-2 acre lakes with no weed or no islands, you can catch a real high percentage of the fish, but every single water is different. Everywhere we go is different. And we keep saying that, it's all very site specific. People say, on average, what do you catch in a lake? It's like, well, how long is a bit of string? So that's worth bearing in mind. Also, we go somewhere and they'll say, right, we're going to take all the carp out under 4 pounds, 2 pounds, 5 pounds, whatever, and you don't catch fish like that. You catch an awful lot of slightly, or they've put weight on, or they've lost weight. So it's pointless just putting them all back, because there's no question, a lot of the places we go, it's different on massive bits of water, low stock venues, dog running around. They need careful management of a slightly different nature, but a lot of these, less than 10 acres say, it's quite easy to create space by taking silvers out, but if the silvers aren't there because the cormorants feed them, or they're hiding, and there's not the amount you think, then sometimes it's still beneficial to take some carp out. This is generally for carp waters, but even so, in other species, multi-species waters, you still crop some fish. A lot of people just leave it to nature, which is absolutely fine, you know, it's up to them, and let predators do the work. But we don't like wasting fish, we don't like killing fish, we like to use them. Most places have got another water where they can move those fish, so that's always preferable. Yes, you can try and sell them to a fish dealer, etc., that's not a problem. Get all the paperwork sorted out, health checks, etc., but the crux of the matter is, a lot of the time we go places and they don't understand the basics. They'll sort of net the fish and then put them all back and say, well, that's all right, we've seen what's going on, or they net the fish. We catch a lot of fish and you know what wants doing. A lot of these places are crying out for some simple cropping or some simple, just basic management, and a lot of it comes down to multiple aspects of the job. So it's not all about the fish. Half the time you know they're going to buy more fish, and we do ourselves out of a lot of fish sales by trying to be honest with people and saying, look, personally I wouldn't stock any more fish, because you can stock the best fish in the world into a lot of these lakes. It's not going to do any good, because they simply haven't got the space or food available for them to do any good anyway. But people quite happily chuck 5-10 grand at fish quite often on an annual basis, but then you suggest doing other things, you know, chalking, tree work's a massive one, and they don't want to know. Oh, we're not going to pay for that, we'll just that'll eat into our fish budget. Plants are the same old thing. We go to a lot of places absolutely void of vegetation and the water quality is quite poor, not very productive bits of water, and they wonder why. They blame it on the fish straight away. Really, you can do an awful lot. Like whenever we're looking at places to potentially take over or help with, you know, and be involved as a partner, the last thing we worry about is the fish, because if you sort out the habitat, sort out the environment that the fish are in, the fish do the rest themselves. They'll grow anyway. You know, we've turned lakes around that are full of old fish. You know, you wouldn't know they're old looking at them, but on paper they're old, and you'd be amazed what can happen just by sorting out everything else. And plants are a big part of that. The right plants, the right tree work, doing everything sensibly, and it's hard work, it's graft, but a lot of the time that's far more beneficial than putting another few fish in. There's always scope for stocking all the time, especially if you are cropping silvers and you think, well, okay, now we've created some space, or carp. You know, if we get asked a lot, if how do we get tench to breed in the lake? Well, if you've got tons of other fish, you still need to make that space, in my opinion. There's only so much space in every bit of water that you ever go to. Anglers will always think taking fish out is a bad idea because we're not going to catch them, but that's honestly not true. So many places are at the point where the fish aren't growing anyway. The lake's saturated with fish, and to make them grow again and start breeding successfully, you either make space, start feeding, ideally a combination of the two, but just use all these tools, all these little jobs you can do them to a high standard, do them properly, and that's when you get results. Especially if you are thinking about buying fish. We go to, again, a lot of waters where they've already got loads of new fish and they want to put more in because the ones that are there aren't quite as big as they want. Well, you're missing out. You're not getting into the problem. The problem is you've already reached a point where the lake's not going to support them half the time, or you're not patient enough to wait and take on board all the other bits and pieces that go with it. So it's just worth bearing in mind. Think about what you're trying to achieve. If you come to us with a plan of what you're trying to achieve, it's very easy for us to help. If we turn up and you sort of say, oh, we don't really know, we sort of want this, we want that, it's like, oh, hang on a minute, I'd do this, but you might do something different. It's very, very easy to have a plan and stick to it, and that's half the battle. If you're organised and you know what you want to achieve in the next 5-6 years, it's a doddle. You just turn up to a lake and you say, well, okay, well, all I'd do is A, B and C. All the anglers want to hear is put more fish in, but a fraction of the time we'll actually advise that, bearing in mind we sell fish as well, we farm fish, and that in itself I would like to think would hit home to people how important it is to do the other stuff, because if all we're going to do is go around and just say, oh, buy more fish, that's just, we're not doing our job then. Everyone's got loads of fish, and they will have now. Summers we're having, the amount of people doing it, everyone's always going to have loads of fish for sale. It's easy just to keep restocking, and that's the easy option. A lot of angling clubs generate money and it sits in a bank account to the end of the year, and they say, oh, we'll just buy more fish to keep the anglers happy. I don't think you should do that all the time. When you've got fish there that you can use, potentially sell, or even a lot of the time people keep putting fish into lakes where they'll just go and hide with all the others. So if you've got massive amounts of snags, it's worked at Horseshoe and it's worked at loads of other fisheries we work at, where rather than buying fish, we said, look, why don't you just give it a year where we actually do some other work, remove snags, do some planting, address the water quality issues, address lots of other issues that got going on, which is basically just manual labour. And people don't realise how important and the results they can get just by doing that. And plus you're benefiting the entire fishery as a whole, not just trying to please a few anglers. And again, I always bang on about it with bank erosion. We've been to 4 or 5 fisheries in the last week, 10 days, where they desperately need help with their bank erosion problem, to the point where some of them, they've got gaps between lakes that are so thin, if they don't address it soon, they're going to have real issues, and it's going to cost, instead of it costing a bit of money to put right, it's going to cost a lot of money. So you always have to bear these things in mind and start thinking about the bigger picture, and always look a year ahead rather than just thinking, oh good, we can get a couple of scaly bangers.